Good evening and welcome to Democratic TV, community television for Democrats, by Democrats, and usually about Democrats. Tonight we have a special program featuring one of our colleagues who passed away in September and a retrospect on his impact on Democratic TV, but also his impact on public policy in the whole nation, really, and certainly in our memory in Knox County in Knoxville in the last several years. His name is John Stewart. John came to Knoxville to work for TVA in the upper echelons of their management many years ago, 40 years ago. But before that, he had been in public policy initiatives in the U.S. House and Senate. He was an aide to Senator Humphrey and was the point person for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. His office was the object or the subject of the Watergate break-in, and he spent many years in Tennessee as well, working for TVA and advocating for public policies in Tennessee that ranged from Medicaid expansion, income tax, to outsourcing at UT in the later years. And he also, as a public servant, he was known to clean up the trash along his street. He lived on Ridge Rock Road so that he and his neighbors would not have to drive home to a trashy street. So his public service ranged everywhere. One of the things that was said about him in the News Sentinel was in an article by Georgiana Vines, and Georgiana said that he didn't spend a day of his life without thinking about what the needs were for others. Well, a little bit of background on how John came to DTV. After the Trump administration, after Trump was elected, he came to me and he said, "We need to beef up DTV. We need to make sure that it's recognizable, that it's dealing with important issues, that we've got the best people possible talking about those issues on." To back that up, then he brought with him a committee of several people who had a variety of talents and were able to make DTV a bit more of an interesting show because it had a lot more stuff to it, a lot more emphasis on substance and a lot more substance to it. So anyway, what we're asking you to do is stay with us tonight as we look back on the life at times of John Stewart and DTV and learn to appreciate what John meant to Knoxville, Knox County, and to the nation, as well as who he was and why he was such a friend. I know I, for one, miss him dearly already.
You got a good story on Watergate.
Yeah, you do have a great story on Watergate.
I was working at the Democratic National Committee during Watergate, and it was my office that the burglars broke into. And Nancy and I got a call from my secretary, who had been called by the D.C. police, saying that our office had been broken into by 6 burglars. And what did we do?
Didn't they catch them?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They caught him.
They caught him in your office, right?
And so what a shock that was. We were sound asleep, Nancy and I, sound asleep at home. Phone rings, middle of the night. I figure, oh my God, someone's been killed.
Somebody's died, right?
Yeah. And no, it was just my secretary saying that the D.C. police wanted me to go down to the precinct house and swear out a complaint against these 6 burglars that they had apprehended in my office. It was from that moment, that precise moment, a little over 2 years later, that Richard Nixon resigned because of all of that. That was the beginning of the fall of Richard Nixon when that phone rang in our bedroom.
It's changed.
We had a German Shepherd by the name of Alexander, and every morning we lived about 8 blocks from the Capitol. Alexander and I would walk up to the Capitol. I'd take him off the leash, and he would just take off across those Capitol grounds. It was the greatest thing for Alexander. And I just stood there and watched it. And then, sort of saying a silent prayer, hopefully Alexander won't get any wild ideas to just take off. But he always came back. Yeah. But it was on the Capitol grounds where this occurred. It was just wonderful. So let me tell you a little bit about the Capitol, and Nancy can chime in as we go. But there is every nook and cranny in that building has a story to tell. And then one special thing I will say that was always great for us is there was a big, huge painting of the signing of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And there's pictures of all the delegates to the Constitutional Convention in this picture. And there is a key that identifies each one of these delegates who it was. And George Washington is very prominent, and Benjamin Franklin is very prominent. One of my ancestors was Nicholas Gilman. Gilman is my middle name. He was a delegate to the convention from New Hampshire. He was the last delegate to arrive. He finally got there in July of 1787. After all the work had been done, Nicholas Gilman staggered into the assembly. And so the artist who painting this magnificent big painting took that into account. And there's this little head. You see, it's just this tiny little head. Those of you who see the picture on the screen, they're two delegates with their arms outstretched. And underneath those arms, if you look very closely, you will see just a little head. That's ancestor Nicholas Gilman. And so he obviously was not a factor of great note in the convention, but at least he was there.
He got
there. He got
right.
there.
Well, no credit for showing up for the ribbon cutting, huh?
So anyway, we say all this because as we go back in these memories, that it was so excruciating to watch what happened last week. I want Nancy to join in on this, but one of the fondest, we've been married 63, almost 64 years now. And one of the fondest memories of our married life was on January 19th, 1961. If you think about that, that's the evening before the inauguration of John F. Kennedy on January 20th, 1961. That afternoon and evening, it snowed in Washington. And did it snow? It snowed and snowed. And so we lived just 2 blocks away. So we finally said, let's go on over and see what is happening. How are they going to do this? So we walked over to the Capitol, and the snow was everywhere. They have all these benches set up and everything. They're all covered with snow. Everything's covered. I mean, like a half a foot of snow. More, maybe 8 inches. I mean, it was a lot of snow. And so we go out on the West Terrace. Now, those of you who saw the pictures from last week, the one major entry point that the thugs and goons and terrorists used was through the West Terrace. It's what faces the Washington Monument. And so Nancy and I are back there on the West Terrace around 10 o'clock on the evening of January 19th, and we had one robust snowball fight. I'm telling you, Nancy thinks she won. I think I won.
I did.
I think I won. But we said, how are they going to have the inauguration tomorrow in a blizzard, for crying out loud? But, they worked all night. They got snow blowers and they did everything. And fortunately, it stopped snowing. And on the 20th, the sun was out. It was a bright, crystal clear day. And it was frigid. We had tickets where we had to stand on the Capitol, the House steps to watch. We didn't have seats. We had to stand on the House steps. We needed tickets even to get there to watch the inauguration. And the temperature fluctuated between 6 and 8 degrees. And we just about damn near froze to death. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Was it worth it?
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, I mean, that's
when Robert Frost was reading his poem, and he had trouble seeing it because there was a little bit of wind and it was so cold, and poor fellow struggled. So, and then of course we heard John Kennedy give his "Ask Not What Your Country Can Do for You" speech. That was that one. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was definitely worth it.
Well, when Robert Frost couldn't read what he'd written, he recited one of his poems.
Yes, he recited it.
From memory.
Yeah.
And we were so young. I mean, we were young, honest to God, once we were. And that was this is 1961. And we were so excited to be there. And it was just a great these are the kind of memories that you carry with you for the whole time.
Yeah. I think, being steeped in all of that history and that reverence, to see what played out on January 6th must have been
just sickening,
pretty disturbing.
One last crazy story, and I'll shut up. In 1964, a bunch of us are writing speeches for Hubert Humphrey's vice presidential campaign. He was running for vice president of the United States with Lyndon Johnson. Johnson for president, Humphrey for vice president. And 6 of us were sequestered over in the east front of the Capitol. They had extended the east front, and there were some new rooms. And so we were able to access one of those rooms and borrow it from another senator. And so that's where we worked. Now, it's against the law to do that today, but it wasn't in 1964. So we're over there, and one day we had a very, very heavy day, and it was 2 a.m., and we were still working over there. And I finally just said, all right, folks, enough is enough. Let's do something other than sit here and write stuff. Let's go down to the rotunda and play touch football. And they said, what, are you crazy? I said, no, I'm not. Let's go. We had a football. I said, we're going down to the rotunda and play touch football. And so we did. We went down to the rotunda and we played touch football at 2 a.m. in the rotunda of the Capitol. And 2 Capitol cops came by and they looked at us and they said, what are you doing? I said, we're playing touch football. And they said, well, isn't that interesting? And so then they watched, and after a while, they started cheering. That was the atmosphere that existed in those days. And I say, I will bet you that very few people can say they played touch football at 2 a.m. in the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. That is a small group of people. I'm very old. So I was working in the Senate back in 1964 when there was this 60-day filibuster by the Southern Democrats trying to block the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in those days, you needed to get 67 votes for cloture. And I could go on for this half hour talking about all the things we did and why it worked and what it was, but no one's really interested in that. That was a long, long time ago. But there are some lessons, I think, that come out of that. And what's been described is the talking filibuster that we all think of in terms of Jimmy Stewart and so forth. That no longer exists, but it could exist if the senators made it exist. What happens now is any bill comes up and they don't have to get 50 votes to this bill. They now have to get 60 votes. So what used to be almost all bills in the Senate passed with a 51 vote majority. That is no longer the case. You're faced with this filibuster threat. And what has happened in recent years is that they have a test vote right up front. And so they have a quick test vote, and do 60 people then right up front
vote to do away with the filibuster on that particular bill? And the answer almost always is no. And so then the Senate just simply moves on to something else. And it ends up as a way to seriously block all sorts of legislation, hundreds of bills. It is up into 300s now, when it used to be you'd have one or two filibusters maybe a year, if that. Now they're having these test votes and these 60-vote requirements all the time. And it has just raised holy hell with any serious legislating done. The Senate used to be called the world's greatest deliberative body. Now it's just a joke because of what has happened. So something has got to change. And I think we are in a moment when that is becoming a real possibility, because Senator McConnell just yesterday said that he was going to devote all of his time, 100% of his energy, to blocking everything that President Biden wants to do. And of course, he did that to President Obama, and it was fairly successful. So the Democrats are faced with a real test of will here. Can they amend Rule 22 in such a way that it will not prove to be a total roadblock to everything the Biden administration wants to do? One more thing, and then I'll yield the floor. The thing that was really essential in '64, when we broke the Southern Democratic filibuster after 60 days, was public pressure from outside. It had become a moral question. Jim Crow could no longer be sustained as an element of American democracy. And so you had religious denominations, you had nuns and priests and stated clerks and individual members of congregations. You had all sorts of interest groups. You had civil rights groups. They were focused intently on getting this done. And with their pressure and with some great leadership from Senator Humphrey, a Democrat, and Senator Kuechel of California, a Republican, they got it done. And it was one of the great victories in the 20th century in terms of legislative accomplishments. One thing that has been suggested is that you could rewrite Rule 22, that in terms of these quorum calls, make the people who are filibustering, those who are trying to block action, make them have 41 votes on the floor in answer to the quorum call. And that may sound easy, but it's not if these things happen at 2 a.m. So what you're doing is you're shifting the burden from those who are trying to kill the filibuster, which was where we were in '64. You would be shifting the burden to those who are conducting the filibuster in 2021. And that's a much heavier burden. And I think it opens up possibilities of working out compromises, of picking up a few Republican votes, Mitch McConnell notwithstanding. You would have to use the nuclear option probably to get that rules change, but I think that would have some attraction, because you wouldn't get rid of the filibuster. You would just make it harder for those who are filibustering to do it. And I think maybe you would. There are two key votes among the Democrats. The senator from West Virginia and the senator from Arizona are both moderate to conservative Democrats, and they're very uncertain about some of these things. In this approach, they could say we did not get rid of the filibuster, but we allowed the president's program to go forward, and that might be a formula that would work. but it's impossible for anybody on the outside, like we all are. And boy, I have been on the outside for many, many years to know exactly what the best path is. And it's worth paying attention to. I'm sure there are people who watching this show who could care less about the filibuster and have never thought about it whatsoever. But if they have any interest in the viability of American democracy, and presumably people ought to at least have some sense that American democracy counts, that it matters, they should be interested in this battle, because it is a battle that's going to have a big impact on American democracy. The Republicans have gone absolutely crazy. I mean, they're absolutely crazy.
Now I got to talk a little bit about how you got here.
Okay.
I distinctly have the sense that when all this started and you announced that you were going to run to be our mayor, you were clearly an underdog.
Yes, I think so.
And there were several other folks in that competition who were much better funded than you were. I mean, orders of magnitude better funded, and also better known, I think.
Yes, I think that's fair.
And so that didn't deter you in the least. You were very confident from the beginning and told folks that. But then all candidates do that. So what'd you do? How'd you pull it off?
Well, first of all, I had an amazing group of volunteers. They worked really hard. I had a great campaign team, Sarah Birkeland and Carter Hall. Sarah was my manager and Carter Hall was my field director, and they're excellent. They helped us campaign very smart. We always had to be very smart and efficient with our time and our money because we had no other choices. We just had two paid staffers and myself, and so everybody else was volunteer, and particularly until after the primary, we were really very much a shoestring operation. But I think what did it is a great field operation, really getting out there. I knocked on doors. I loved it. I think that's the other thing is people could tell that I was enjoying myself, that I was working hard, and it was like up and down and high pressure, but that I enjoyed the work of meeting and talking to the people of Knoxville, and that would make it so I would enjoy my job as mayor. And I think people are attracted to a candidate who seems to be enjoying the process and also positive and really hardworking and responsive. And not that the other candidates weren't, but I also think was pretty well prepared to answer questions when they had them, whether it was on their doorstep or a candidate forum, because I have this background working for the city, serving on the school board, and a master's degree in urban and regional planning. Qualifications matter too. Even though I wasn't as well known, I think a lot of people did remember me. I was 10 years on the school board.
I mean, they knew you'd been around.
Yeah, and I have a memorable name.
Yeah,
it didn't hurt to be a woman. People more than ever are willing to support women, not because I'm a woman, but they didn't have any reservations about that. I think that kind of attitude is long gone in Knoxville, thankfully, and it helped me stand out a little bit from the crowd.
Well, you also gave the distinct impression you knew what you were talking about.
That helps.
And,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I can speak very personally to that. When all this began, my wife Nancy and I, we didn't know who we were going to support, and so we went to the 4th District Democratic meeting. One must have been Tuesday night
at the library.
Yeah, at the library, and you were the speaker, and. So I'm sitting there, and you're speaking and talking and answering questions. And I said to Nancy at the end, I said, God, she's terrific. Let's just say we're going to work for India. What do you say? And she said, I agree. Let's do it. Let's go.
I remember that. And I was like, wow, that's 2 more right there. And obviously, you and Nancy are pretty well connected. So I appreciate the early support. Made a big difference.
Well, I mean, we know a little bit about campaigning, having been, in my case, campaigning in one way or another for 4 presidential campaigns, and for golly, almost 60 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
You have
that's getting serious.
That's a lot of experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a pleasure to do that, but it was simply because you knew what you were talking about. And
well, thank you.
And that is, I won't say it's rare, but it's awfully good to encounter something like that when you see it and hear it, because it does give you a sense of confidence that this person, when they're elected, will deal with reality,
right,
rather than some fantasy that they carry around in their heads.
Right.
We have more than enough at the national level right now.
Right, and being mayor is a very practical role. It's not a role that you're going to be, fighting ideological battles so much as like how to, do economic development and bring more affordable housing. And so I think thank you for saying that, and I think other people agreed with you. So
yeah, they obviously did.
I just want to join in complimenting and applauding Renee. I mean, she is a candidate's candidate. She really is. And it's just a shame that East Tennessee is sort of constructed the way it is, because we would have a real representative if Renee was there. Burchett, for God's sake, signed this screwball Texas suit. I wrote Burchett a letter and said that he had violated his constitutional oath, and therefore he had but one course, and that he should resign from Congress. And so far, I think he's taking that under advisement, but
he's going nowhere.
He does know where I stand on the issue. Yeah. I didn't do anything terribly dramatic this year. Only one thing. Election night, it wasn't looking too good for Sleepy Joe. And so I said to myself, what would Harry Truman do? Because I am one of the few people alive in this event who's alive when Harry Truman was president. And I said, Harry Truman would go to bed and go to sleep. And that's what I did. I went to bed and went to sleep. And when I woke up, Biden was comfortably ahead and stayed ahead despite all this idiotic carrying on that's been going on since then. So it's been a year that unlike any that I've ever encountered. And I did, since 1952, I've been doing this. And think about that. It's a long time. Anyway, so far, so good. We got a new president. He's great. We're going to support him. We're going to work like the heck to help him prevail. And we've got some tough fights ahead, but we're ready for it. Because 2021 can be a great year. It really can. So I think it's about time to drink a toast to 2021, where Joe will reign and Kamala will star, caring for each other and for all our neighbors. America will be reborn, and so will each of us, no matter our age. To 2021.
To 2021.
Yeah.